All right, class, our next type of problem will be a two-sample z-test in interval for a proportion, which was chapter 21. So in 2000, the UN claimed there was a higher illiteracy rate in men than in women from the country of Qatar. So they give us two samples here, and you can see they're in proportion form, like 45 out of 234, 42 out of 251. So this should be your tip-off that this is a two-sample for a proportion, two-sample z-test. So what I need to do is I need to put those into Staplet, the 45 out of 234 and 42 out of 251. And before I do that, I set some numbers that N is 234 for M is men. So I find PM, which is what percentage are illiterate, 45 out of 234, so that's 0.1923. Actually, I'm going to find like 0.1923, 0.8077. I'm going to find those in Staplet, and I'm going to show you how. All you really need at this point is to know that it's 45 out of 234. And then you got to figure out how many are literate, which would be 234 minus 45. That is 189. So you have to know enough to go into Staplet. So I want you to go into Staplet now and pause if you need to. And in Staplet, we're going to do a two-sample z-test for a proportion. So you would click on that one. It'll look like a little table that you have to fill out. And I've already got mine ready to go. So this is what mine looks like, and you can pause it and get yours filled out if you need to, but I wanted to show you. I got 45 men are illiterate, and then literate is 189. And so I just did a little subtraction there, and then 42 out of 251 for the women. And so I labeled the top two, the groups, the men and the women. So 45 and 189, and I label these illiterate and literate. And then 42 and 209. And since they listed the men first, I put the men first on here. So that's how I have mine written, and I labeled it illiteracy rate. So take a little time to type that in if you need to, and we will continue when you're ready. All right, I'm going to begin analysis. And I have my data right there. And right here is where you could find the actual percentages, right? 19% of men are illiterate, while 16% of women, 16.73% of women. So the men are definitely higher, but do we have enough data right here to prove it? So our HO here, listed down here at the bottom, the HO is that if I were to subtract them, the men minus the women, it would be 0 that they're the same. We're assuming they're the same. We have to find convincing evidence for HA. To try to reject HO, we got to find convincing evidence that they're actually higher than 0, that the men would be higher than the women. Since it says in the problem higher rate, so that is greater than 0. So the higher number minus the lower number would be greater than 0. So when I put it in the Staplet, I'm going to do a two-sample test. P1 is my men. Make sure you put them in right. It could be P2 could be the men. Then you'd have to flip this thing. And it's greater than 0. And so you can perform your test, and there is my z-score and my p-value, my z-value and my p-value. So that will be my answer for z-value and p-value. My p-value is 0.2369. Whoops. 0.2369. And this is 0.7164. And the book went with 0.24, but we got 0.2369. You always go 4 digits on your answer. So I would actually rewrite this as 2369. Since the p-value of 0.2369, it's way too high. It's way higher than the 0.02 significance level, so we fail to reject the null. There is not convincing evidence that the illiteracy rate in men is higher than in women in Qatar. We do not have convincing evidence. And then I'm going to get my confidence interval next. For a one-tailed, remember this was greater than, remember you do 1 minus 2 alpha, which is 1 minus 2 times 0.02, so it's 1 minus 0.04. It would be a 96. So instead of a 98 like we would have done with a one-tailed, we're doing a 96% interval. And so I'm going to bring back Staplet real quick. And let's take a look at a 96% interval. So I'm going to switch this test to interval. And I'm going to do 96%. 96. So let's take that and replace it with a 6. Do the interval. And there is my interval. The low is 0.0467 and the high is 0.0967. So let me put those in. All right, so now that we have our confidence interval, that's come to our conclusion here. So that confidence interval 96% is 0.0467 to 0.0967, which means we are 96% confident the true proportion of the difference between the men and the women is between negative 0.467 and 0.0967. And since 0 is included in there, we do not have convincing evidence and we fail to reject HO. And this matches our conclusion that we came to with the p-value and z-value, which means we came to a good conclusion. They should always match if we did our math right. All right, so that is a 2-sample z-test for a proportion problem.